Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on The Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. This is episode 4, and I'm pleased to be joined by Bailey Engel. Bailey he has many hats. I know he's wearing one right now, but he's got many hats he can put on. He's the voice of the Bluefield College Rams. He's an ACC Network talent doing a lot of Virginia Tech games. Of course, he went to Virginia Tech, his alma mater. Crazy to believe it's almost 5 years, maybe 4 or 5 years since he graduated. 3 years
Great,
now, I
man.
guess.
I haven't been out that long.
3 years, and he, of course, got a lot of experience in minor league baseball. And so, Bailey, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks, man. Glad to join you and happy to talk about sports, even with none on.
Yeah, for sure. Gotta keep the sports conversation going. So, Bailey, like I mentioned, a broadcaster is a passion of his to be a play-by-play broadcaster. When did that passion start for you?
I think I want to say probably when I was in like third grade. My dad and I were coming back from a Steeler game, and it was our first Steeler game ever. And not related, but they got whooped by the Titans that day. The Titans were like Steve McNair, Eddie George. Like the Titans were really good. But we were listening to the post game show and the play by play because we left early. And there's this guy Myron Cope, who's actually a legendary Steelers broadcaster. And I mean, he had this like crazy Pittsburgh voice. I mean, I'm from the country, about 30 minutes outside of Richmond, Virginia. So I was like, I've never heard this accent before. And it was just cool how passionate he was about talking football, and that really stuck with me. And I think it kind of I kept up a passion for broadcasting when I was playing my like Madden, and I would announce the games for myself. And I realized I was very self-aware that I probably wasn't going to play college sports. So I wanted to stay in it because it's a huge passion of mine. And I did PA in high school, and that's kind of where everything's derived from.
And you decided to go to Virginia Tech, which, I mean, you look at it now, Tech's doing a lot of stuff to help grow sports broadcasters, whether it's through the VTSMA program. I know that they just recently got a school within the Department of Communications, going to be their own school. But obviously when you came in, I guess that would have been, 2010 maybe, when you were a freshman at Tech?
Man, you think I'm way older? No, I came in at 2013.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'm only 2 years older than you.
Yeah, I keep getting confused, like your high school, when you graduate high school and when you graduate college. So yeah.
No, it's unimportant. But yeah, so I came in, I toured Virginia Tech. I guess it would have been 2012, my junior year, and they really sold me on the idea that the communication department, as it was known then, was going to be kind of an intimate thing. Whereas I always thought a big school was just going to be 300-person lectures. And of course you have that at Virginia Tech, but communication, you're going to have your smaller classes. And they were also building up the idea of the new news studio in what was going to be the Moss Arts Center that was being built. And they were really, really excited about that. And they made a really hot, like hard sell about it. And Virginia Tech, I've told people this before, growing up where I'm from, Virginia Tech didn't seem like a giant culture shock. And it seemed like a little town in the country like I was used to, but it also had a lot more diverse experiences, a lot more people, a lot more things to do, frankly, than where I grew up. And I was going to know a few people at Virginia Tech too, so I wasn't going in just with absolutely no friends, which I think I would have been all right even if that had happened. But they really sold it how good the comm department was and was going to be in the future. And luckily it ended up, getting even better.
Yeah, just for clarification, Bailey, if I'm doing my math correctly, graduated class of 2017.
There you go.
Class of 2019. It's the beard. How long have you been growing the beard? I know it's relatively new for you, but how long have you been growing the beard now?
So I guess it was 2018. I started growing a beard when I was working with the Seawolves. I think there was just a point where I was like, let's just try this. Like, who cares? And I just kind of wanted to look a little bit older. I've kind of thought maybe I should shave it. I don't know. I don't know how. I'm almost like scared. Like I have these weird dreams where I accidentally shave it and then I'm back to being kind of like a baby-faced guy. I mean, I want to look older, And that's the whole point. So it's, I guess, to answer your question, like almost 2 years now.
I actually think it looks like when you first started growing it, I was a little skeptical, but I think it's actually grown into like a nice beer. So I think you should keep it. My personal opinion.
Hey, thanks, man. I hope people watch this and then they agree and they're like, no, you should shave. So we'll see.
So I guess my point, my original point before I, started butchering when you graduated is the fact that, Tech didn't have a tradition of sort of developing sports broadcasters like a Syracuse or, like a Elon or some of these other well-known broadcasting schools. And you kind of paved the way for, what's happening now with 3304 Sports, kind of a student-run broadcasting network, digital media, and, sports and broadcasting really becoming its own separate school. How does it make you feel now? Do you kind of see yourself as a pioneer that helps sort of help usher in all of this new sort of focus on sports broadcasting? I mean, how is it like to see sort of these current students being able to do what you do?
Nah, I don't want to say I'm a pioneer. I hope nobody really says that they're a pioneer, man. Like I'm not on CBS calling, the Super Bowl. I feel very lucky to be part of kind of the infancy of the program that ended up being 3304. There were guys ahead of me, and all of this is thanks to Andrew Allegretto, of course. I mean, starting the program, starting mentoring young people that want to be in play-by-play and sideline reporting and other avenues of sports media. I'm lucky that guys were ahead of me, like Kevin Burke, who is now an SID at George Washington. I mean, he's done some broadcasting for the Salem Red Sox. I know I'm missing at least one stop of his career, but Danny Noakes was really important to me when I came in my sophomore year. He was the senior that was getting all of the ESPN3 reps, and he started getting a lot of the, early ACC Network reps as well before the official launch back in August of 2019. But those guys were, if I had to say anyone was a pioneers, it was those two. And then I didn't really know him, but I had heard we met Brian Marcolini, like my second or third internship meeting, and he works at the Key Play. So all of these guys came before me. And then being in that internship, there were people around you that got to, I mean, you were in it, Billy. There were people around you that got to support you really well. I was lucky to have Nolan Knight around. Morgan Conklin made me better. Maggie Tyler. And I mean, I don't really want to, cut out anybody else's names, but those were the people that were there when I really started and helped me get a lot better.
For sure, there's a lot of people that have laid the groundwork, for this success that's happening right now. And full disclosure, Bailey did kind of help me with my first internship, but working with the Herndon Braves. I wanted to go to your experiences working minor league baseball. I mean, you worked for the Herndon Braves, the Bluefield Blue Jays. You went up to Erie to work with the Seawolves. What's that experience like? I mean, I think a lot of people don't really know what that's like. They just go to a game or they see, oh, you got to do a game. But really for you, there's so many great experiences in there. Just what's that like working minor league baseball?
Well, working the Herndon Braves, obviously a collegiate summer league team, that was really cool because it gave you so many reps. And up until that point, obviously I didn't have that many reps at all, and I didn't have any baseball reps. So it made me a lot better at baseball, just kind of working through the ins and outs of a baseball broadcast. And then when I got to Bluefield, it was, working all the time, just being on that stretch of that grind, even in a short season baseball team. But there weren't as many business things you had to do with the Bluefield job. When you got to Erie, was do the game notes. Of course, isn't in order, but you got to get there at 8:30 in the morning for a game that's going to be at 6:30 at night. So you're not going to leave probably until 11. And God forbid it rains, and you got to do tarp crew. But with Erie, I think was the big official welcoming and kind of almost in the beginning kind of an overwhelming idea of like there are so many other things you have to do to be in a minor league baseball organization. Now in Bluefield, I still had that idea of like you got to find where the pudding is for the picnic and talk to all these other people at the booster club meeting because it's a small town team. In Erie, it's a little bit obviously a bigger market because you go from rookie to double A. And there are more people listening, and the baseball's a little bit better. But mainly working in Erie got me ready to possibly work in sports in all other areas, whether it be minor league baseball or in college like I am right now in Bluefield College, where I'm not just calling the games, I'm doing other things as well.
And I think probably the most intriguing athlete you've covered is I'm willing to venture you would say Vlad Guerrero Jr. You guys intersected when you both were with the Bluefield Blue Jays. He obviously is an up and coming player. Finished second in the home run derby last year. I thought he should have won, but unfortunately they don't count
He should have.
previous rounds in the final round of the home run derby. But do you have any stories about Vlad Guerrero Jr.? I mean, I know his dad came, the great Hall of Famer, came to see a game, but any stories with him? I mean, did you guys get to interact a lot?
We did. A lot of people thought that, I mean, we interacted, but it wasn't like we talked. I mean, I would drive him to interviews and stuff because, Vlad was 17 at the time. And a lot of people, including myself, thought, oh, since his dad played in America for so long, his son is going to be able to speak English pretty fluently. And that wasn't the case. I believe that Vlad Jr. had spent most of his upbringing in the Dominican Republic with his mom. And I was always told that his parents were really great with him and making him very mature, which I would attest to. I mean, the kid was very wise beyond his years, being 17, and had the grasp of how he was still just a minor league baseball player. And from what I heard, everybody loved him as a teammate. Nobody ever had anything bad to say about him in the clubhouse. But it was pretty cool in the idea that in Bluefield, this tiny town in southern West Virginia and Virginia, because we're right on the border, that had this minor league phenom. So the thing I wasn't necessarily ready for, but was introduced quickly to, was the fact that there would be national media attention on what we were doing. So I guess I should say international, because TSN, which is Canadian ESPN, came down to film him for like 3 or 4 days and went pretty in depth of his entire experience in Bluefield. And it wasn't completely attributed to Vlad, but we also had Vice Sports come into that summer and filmed about our Mercer Cup rivalry. So we had a lot of national media attention. I'm trying to think of a good Vlad story, but other than that, I mean, other than just him being really just mature. I mean, he would do this weird thing. I remember the players would say, and he would like lay down in the dugout, and like, gross, man. Like, everybody's spitting in there, and they told him to get up. I mean, these guys that are just, trying to, like, 22, 23, 24 years old, that are 7 years older than him, are just like trying to look out for him as a kid. But obviously he was the only one from that team that has since made the major leagues.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm sure you gotta, when you watch him, playing in the major leagues, just gotta pinch yourself. Man, I was at least there for a small step of his journey. Speaking about Bluefield and Erie, you talk about the other team that you got to really cover, Double A. Of course, minor league baseball. Commissioner Manfred was looking to cut a bunch of minor league teams. I believe both of those teams were on that initial list, and that was, I believe, before really all this coronavirus pandemic stuff started to happen. And now with the situation we're in, I think it's only gotten more exacerbated. What's your reaction to those teams potentially being cut? I think a lot of people don't realize, I mean, forgetting just the games for the players, the reps for the broadcasters. I mean, this is really a part of the local economy, these minor league teams.
Well, I'm really upset that it might happen. And in Bluefield, a lot of things have been taken away from the people that have lived here for a while, just because of how industry has kind of left, and coal is a declining industry in West Virginia over the past 50 years. So as bad as minor league baseball leaving sounded, I was more surprised that they would do it in Erie. And there's another town that's right near the Rust Belt where they've had industry come and go with General Electric leaving throughout the years. But it still shocked me, because I knew when they were going to retoy how minor league baseball players were going to get paid, that they were going to take away some levels. So I didn't really expect Bluefield to not be included in that list. I was, however, pretty shocked that Erie and another team in the Eastern League, Binghamton, was included in it. And I'm sad for my friends that I've come to know in Bluefield and in Erie. I've said this before, the general manager of the Bluefield Blue Jays, Rocky Malamasura, is one of the best people I know. And he works really hard to make sure that the Bluefield Blue Jays are still a viable team in this area, and he's a staple in the community. And then in Erie, I mean, you got a great staff of guys up there. I mean, Greg Gainey is my boss, the assistant GM and the broadcaster. Then you got Greg Coleman, who's the general manager for them, who were great to me in the 2 seasons that I worked there. And to think that there's a chance that they won't be affiliated with the Detroit Tigers anymore, or just affiliated with anybody, it's kind of upsetting. Now, I do think with Erie, at least, there's going to be, if this unfortunately does happen, there's been rumblings of an independent team or something like that happening there. That won't be as bad, I guess, but it's still upsetting that they would do that because it's just getting better in Erie. There's a bunch of stadium renovations and the staff is always very creative. There's some really talented people working there, and to think that baseball might be going away is pretty devastating.
And, on the flip side, I mean, you're talking about broadcasters like yourself, up-and-coming broadcasters. I did it for a few summers going to the Northwoods League. You've got students at Virginia Tech and other schools trying to get reps, but here you are with these minor league teams, cutting potential opportunities for these broadcasters. What's your advice to people that want to be broadcasters like yourself that are in this situation coming up? First of all, the fact that these minor league teams might get cut, but then also the fact that you're in the middle of a pandemic where a lot of sports just haven't been able to resume and might not resume, at least for the foreseeable future.
I wish I had advice because we've never really been through anything like this before. It does stink that when this is all over, there are some teams there, or there are some teams that won't be there anymore. So that's going to affect the opportunities that young broadcasters can get out of college or in college that I was so lucky to have. But I guess, I mean, just try to stay sharp, try to find ways to hone your craft. I mean, Billy, you're trying to do it right now with these interviews, and I commend that. It's just try to find something to keep your brain moving a little bit, but it's also hard to tell anybody to do anything during this super stressful time. You should also take this as a time to really professionally reflect on what you want to do, not only in your career, but in your personal life as well. And that's something that's been kind of nice about these past couple of months, has been just an entire reboot. If it's the only thing that's a nice thing, it does help you kind of reflect and focus on what you're going to do in the future. But as far as broadcasting goes, man, I don't have any real advice as to what to do because I'm just trying to figure it out myself.
Well, what are you doing? You mentioned staying fresh. What are you personally doing to stay fresh? Are you pulling old video games and calling games or recorded games? What are you doing to make sure you're still in the right state of mind?
Well, I'm very, very lucky that I have a job at Bluefield College as an assistant SID as well as the director of broadcasting. So they've been kind of giving me a blank check on what I can do creatively and make some videos for them. I just had to film our end of the year awards show, and I did it right in the background. I had to take the Pubs of Blacksburg thing out, but I did it right on that wall from my home and compiled the whole thing on my computer. So that was actually one of the last things I've had to do sportscasting talent-wise. I've been trying to make some videos and some content to try to promote our brand, which is a side note, another thing that I have to do where I'm not just calling the games at Bluefield, kind of what I alluded to when I was working in Erie and in Bluefield. You're not just calling the games. But, I mean, I've been watching a lot of old Steelers games. I've been watching some old like Virginia Tech clips and just some, college football, college basketball greatest hits on YouTube over the past couple of months. I was really sad. I don't know if you're aware, but the YouTube account Hokey Tapes was taken down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they had whoever runs that account had full games going back, 25 years of Virginia Tech basketball, football, women's basketball, baseball. They had everything on there. And it was kind of cool to watch some of those games and just see how Lane Stadium has evolved. So I don't really know if that's really kept me sharp as much as it's kept me entertained. But I've also participated in some, I guess, just seminar Zoom calls like a lot of other broadcasters have recently. They had one with the STAA with Bob Costas, and the NSMA had one with Dan Schulman and Jay Billis that I thought was actually pretty interesting about the dynamics of play-by-play in color. And I learned a few things from that. But yeah, other than that, man, there's just watching old games for entertainment, and it's like, oh, the broadcasters sound a little bit different in those super old days, but I mean, there's nothing really to call for me right now.
And I think another reason why for some reason was conflating when you graduated is because you work for the AC Network. Um, so you're back at Tech all the time. Probably for you, feels like you almost never left. I mean, you basically Blacksburg is kind of a second home. You split your time between Blacksburg and Bluefield. What's that been like? I mean, you've had an opportunity to call not only so many different games, so many different sports, but really from a production standpoint, there's nothing better than the AC Network right now. So what's that whole process like, just being able to work an AC Network game?
It's been awesome. It really has. Uh, when the launch was kind of happening, it was just this grand big thing, obviously, and I was really lucky to be a part of that on the Virginia Tech women's soccer game versus Liberty. And I think they flashed to our game at one point, just like 5 seconds. I don't think anything had happened in the game at that point where they put it up, but it was still really cool to be and exposed to a national audience. I mean, they didn't know it was me calling it, but it was cool to be trusted to have that opportunity. The ACC Network team is great. Eric Fry, the director, has been super supportive of me. The lead producer, Daniel Gibbons, has been amazing. I mean, there's a whole crew there. Amanda Rutledge, Ryan Stankard. They've been awesome. And the whole team at Hokie Vision has been very helpful to me. And I mean, they knew me back when I was an undergrad, and to work with them as more of a professional broadcaster now, I think that I've evolved a lot as a broadcaster, but obviously production has as well. And I think another reason why I think the ACC Network is so great, when I started my internship, that was 2014, we were doing like these just web streams on Hokiesports.com, and it was like Hokie Vision Live. And they were really awesome then to me. And then now it's a full-on TV production where we have reads about Disney Plus and to watch on actual TV, and you have a producer in your ear telling you stories to hit on. Whereas, back in the day, it was kind of like you bring the prep, you're the one that's pushing all of the stories, and which to a certain extent is still true. But now I'm working with a great producer in Daniel Gibbons, and we always have kind of a storyline for each game and a narrative that we can push in each opening. And working with graphics has been awesome with Ryan Stankard as well. I mean, it's been a great experience to work with that entire team.
And speaking of prep, how do you prep? I mean, I'm sure it's different from, when you're preparing for a once a week AC Network game as opposed to every day in Erie, trying to find something new for a long baseball season. But take us inside that process of how you prep for a game.
Well, I mean, I like to look up the last couple of box scores, whether it be, any sport I'm doing, and just try to, I know in baseball, I try to mock up what I think the starting lineup might be. So I'll go through all of their particular stats that are very pertinent to the broadcast, batting average, home runs, RBIs, what have you. And then I'll usually, go through the game notes. Uh, Luckily, in a lot of these D1 baseball games, I've been so lucky to call, they have a sports information director and they have game notes that might have some interesting nuggets you might want to push in there. But a lot of times I'll Google their name, and most of the time it's just Joe Smith or whatever, and he plays baseball, and you'll just get a bunch of that. But every once in a while you get a cool little story about what they did in high school, what they do during the summer. And baseball games in particular are very long, so you have a lot of just trying to fill the air. Now with other sports, I mean, I do pretty much the same thing. Try to find the starting lineup, the reserves, and put together just a roster sheet. In Bluefield, it has been particularly hard to prep for football because not only are the rosters huge, but for some of these lower level NAIA schools, obviously, that we're dealing with, there's not a lot of information out there on a lot of these players. So unfortunately, the stories aren't always there, but the rosters are huge every week. So I know that week one is always very stressful because I'm preparing the Bluefield roster and I'm preparing the roster for whoever we're playing. And now as the season goes on, you're still preparing the Bluefield one, but you're only like moving players in and out. Whereas each week you're moving in an entirely new football team. But with every sport, I try to watch a little bit of film, and I'm working with a color commentator. I'll text or call them throughout the week. Mac McCarthy's been great to work with basketball, the ACC Network, and just talking about our what stories we want to share, certain stats that kind of jump out to us. But is basketball too, you have to go to a lot of shoot arounds, just trying to go to practice. I don't really think there's a linear way of describing how to prepare for each sport, but I mean, there's different methods, I think, for every broadcaster, but for mine, you just got to put your hours in, and it's really tough for me to go into a game and feel like I'm not prepped because I don't want to just sit there and wing it, especially on these ACC Network broadcasts where it's such a professional feel to it and has ESPN's name on it. You don't really want to mess up.
Yeah, and for sure. I mean, you work with a number of great guys. Mac McCarthy is one that comes to mind, like you mentioned. Who's your favorite play-by-play broadcaster? I asked Evan Hughes this question, who's another aspiring play-by-play guy. But do you have one off the top of your head that you say is your favorite, or is there a few guys you really like to watch?
I really like. Obviously, I'm a Steeler fan, and I watch a lot of CBS football. I really like Jim Nantz. I do. Just the way he handles such big moments with just poise has been great to watch throughout the years. I mean, there's years where it'll be the NCAA tournament, the Masters, AFC Championship, and the Super Bowl. All Jim Nantz can call. Ian Eagle is another guy I really like to listen to. He's been great on CBS as well. ESPN guys, I do like Sean McDonough. I'm giving Syracuse a little bit of love with the last two guys. But I do like that they handle the big moments and they get the stories out there well. And also for Sean McDonough is actually kind of funny. And I would say with Ian Eagle as well. But with these guys, there's also a great thing that they do where they can bring out their color commentator a lot. And I think that Jim Nantz does a very good job of that with Tony Romo.
For sure. I mean, and you saw Tony Romo, he got paid that huge contract, but let's be honest, I don't think he would have gotten that as good of natural ability as he has. I mean, Jim Nantz really helps set that out of the park. And that's really what you do with a guy like Mac McCarthy. I mean, he's the guy with the basketball knowledge. He's coached in the NCAA tournament, and you just sort of set him up and allow him to hit it out of the park. I'm guessing that's kind of the relationship you guys have.
Yeah. Obviously, there are some growing pains with every time you're working with a new color commentator. And I'd like to think that over the last few years of working with Mac, some of those pains are kind of over, and you're still going to step on each other every once in a while. I mean, you're going to make mistakes, but trying to find that chemistry with someone. I mean, he was working with me when I was still a senior in college. I mean, it may have even been a junior in college. I don't really remember, but we've been working together for at least 3 or 4 years now. And yeah, you're trying to accentuate the broadcast, especially in TV where the color commentator is the star. So Mac is the guy with all the knowledge. I'm just the guy that's kind of trying to let him play. But you also want to have a chemistry where you can make the broadcast warm and it should sound like two guys talking rather than two guys watching a game. So I'd like to think that Mac and I have gotten closer enough throughout the years, and as well as a few of my other color commentators I work with, where I can call them a friend, and that makes it a lot better as well because you get on there and you kind of know each other's comedic timing or conversational timing as to what they can talk about and what's interesting to people.
So to close out, I've got a few rapid fire questions. I don't mean rapid fire, but you can take your time, obviously, but just a couple of hot topics, especially in sports. Who's your favorite Steeler of all time, or who's the best? I guess you can kind of answer that how you want to. Favorite Steeler or the greatest Steeler of all time?
Greatest Steeler of all time is Joe Green. I mean, he's the guy that started the dynasty and how the Steelers were horrible for so many years. And then when he was drafted in 1969, they ended up winning a Super Bowl in 1974. My favorite, Hines Ward. Absolutely. I mean, I think that Hines Ward is just the quintessential Steeler for millennial sports fans, millennial Steeler fans. And he got me really into it because that game I was talking about at the beginning where we went to the Titans game, I'm pretty sure Hines Ward was the only good player on the offense. And that was it was a year before Big Ben came and 2 years before they won the Super Bowl. And he was just the man. And he hit everybody really hard, whether it's cheap or not. And was always smiling. So I loved Hines Ward.
MJ or LeBron, or is there someone else you consider the greatest player of all time?
Oh, my friends are gonna cook me for this one. I think sometimes it's kind of hard to really fairly compare them because of the different eras they played in.
For sure.
Uh, so I mean, I think LeBron is the most unselfish player of all time. I mean, you look at what he does, how many assists he's averaged throughout his career. But it's hard to argue against Michael Jordan. I mean, we've also just watched The Last Dance, so it's kind of hard watching that and be like, oh, he's not the best. But I mean, I'd like to think that LeBron, if he were in that era, would have dominated as well. So I'm gonna go LeBron.
I actually think, I don't know what you think of this. I've actually made the argument Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the greatest player of all time. If you look at I'm talking about career-wise, you look at what he did in high school, college, and the NBA. I mean, he won 3 championships in college, 6 championships in the NBA. He's not the guy who branded the game like Michael Jordan. That you got to give that to MJ. But I just think if you're talking pure career, it's hard to argue a better guy than Kareem.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kareem gets lost in the argument because he's just, I mean, he came into the league in the '70s with the Bucks right before the turn of how popular the NBA became. So it's Michael Jordan that was a huge factor in why it's so well renowned internationally. But I mean, I don't agree with that, but I can see your point. Like, I think that Kareem gets lost in the argument sometimes.
As a Steelers fan, do you believe that Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time?
Yeah, I do. And I think that I started believing that, I guess it was senior year when they came back from 25 down against the Falcons. I was like, there's no doubt now. And I mean, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how he does with the Buccaneers and how well that system and how well Belichick or how much Belichick really benefited him. Obviously, there's a symbiotic relationship there as to why he won 6 Super Bowls. But yeah, I mean, he won 6 Super Bowls over 20 years. And I mean, he whoops the Steelers all the time. So, I mean, he's been doing that since 2001. So it's hard to argue that anybody is better than him, just winning that consistently. And also, to that point, the one year that Tom Brady gets a ridiculous receiver, now they didn't win the Super Bowl, but they went undefeated. So they got Randy Moss. The first year he gets Randy Moss, he breaks the touchdown record and goes 16-0 or 18-1 or whatever when they lose the Super Bowl. So look at what he's winning Super Bowls with. I mean, like Troy Brown, no disrespect to these guys, but like they're not Jerry Rice. Like Troy Brown, Deion Branch. I mean, he made Julian Edelman a star. Wes Welker was like kind of an afterthought on the Dolphins, and then Tom Brady turned his career around. So it's undoubtedly he's the best quarterback of all time, if not the best football player.
I agree with you. I mean, I hate to say it, but if you're just looking, I mean, objectively, you can't really say that there's a better quarterback than Tom Brady.
No.
I'm a big 30 for 30 guy, and I've been watching a lot. Obviously, during this time where we don't have sports, is there do you have a favorite 30 for 30? Are you a big 30 for 30 guy?
Yeah, I watched them. I just got ESPN Plus recently, and I've been trying to watch a bunch of the ones I hadn't seen before, and I've kind of caught up. I mean, The Last Dance kind of sounds like a cop-out because it's so recent. But that's got to be up there. The OJ one, like that might have been probably just as long as the Michael Jordan one. That one was an incredible look at sports and just race and who we are as a country. There's one, I think, about the Russians
Yeah.
of Miracles and Men, that
Yep.
one. I really like that one. I'm a history buff, and I've always really been into the Cold War. And I thought it was kind of cool to humanize those people because, just because they're Russia doesn't mean they're from Russia means they're horrible people. Like those guys were professional athletes, and just to see how big hockey was at the time when the Americans beat them, not only showed that how incredible it was that the Americans beat them, but it was also really cool to see it from the Soviet perspective.
Yeah, I big fan of 30 for 30s. I'd probably say my favorite one would have to be Survive and Advance with the NC State team. And I'm sure you're looking forward to this because, we just had The Last Dance and ESPN's kind of coming out with new 30 for 30s. I know you're probably looking forward to this one too, Long Gone Summer with Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that'll be definitely really interesting. I mean, I remember, 1998, I guess, is when they're documenting. And I mean, I can't remember that. Obviously, I was only 3, but I mean, it'll be interesting to see about how much that meant for baseball because Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, I remember Sammy Sosa as like an Oriole. So that was right when I remember when he went from the Cubs to the Orioles. So it'll kind of be cool to see these guys in their prime before all of the steroid stuff happened, because that's more of what I know in my life. Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, and Rafael Palmeiro speaking in front of Congress at the time. So it'll be kind of a nostalgic look at what baseball used to be.
Here's a question I like to ask: is there a 30 for 30 that has not been done yet that you think would make for a great 30 for 30?
Um, I think that the whole uh, LeBron, D Wade, Chris Bosh, move to the Heat will be interesting. But maybe a better one, maybe a more interesting one to that can be about Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, and Kevin Garnett going to the Celtics. Because for me, that felt like the first big super team. And then everybody started doing that immediately after. And the crazy part is like Paul Pierce acting like, oh, they never did that. I mean, he got 2 of the best players in the NBA to his team, and they went to the finals and won the finals immediately after.
I don't know if they've actually done this. I don't think they have, but I would like to see a documentary done on the Houston Rockets that won 2 NBA championships after Jordan retired. Because I was thinking about it, they pretty much have a 30 for 30 for the Lakers, Celtics, the Bad Boy Pistons, the Last Dance. But you look at the Houston Rockets with Hakeem Olajuwon, how they found him in Nigeria, and he was also they do have a Pi Slamma Jamma one, I believe.
Yeah.
But I think that because that was, I mean, you talk about 2 years Jordan wasn't there, they won the championship. I think that would be interesting, especially because they've been able to sort of document every 30 for 30.
Yeah, and just one more. Actually, I was thinking that Florida team in the 2000s, that college football team that had Tim Tebow, I mean,
Yeah.
Aaron Hernandez, the Pouncey twins. I mean, they had Riley Cooper. I mean, all these guys end up being. I mean, obviously, some of them are infamous, the obvious ones, but like all of those guys on a different just wavelengths of life coming together and succeeding would be pretty interesting to talk about.
And my final question for you, I know, obviously the easy answer is we don't know because there's still a lot that has to happen. But given that sort of uncertainty, factoring that in, do you think we will see the return of the MLB and the NBA at some point this year?
Man, I don't know. I really don't. Like every time that there's some conversation about it, it's just we got to factor in the safety of everybody involved. And I think that it's going to be really tough to realize that for all of these people that are playing these sports. I mean, not only that, all of the people that have to be there. So I don't know about the MLB or NBA, but I mean, just talking about what could happen in the NAIA soon. I mean, we're talking about travel restrictions, how many people can stay in a room, but then you have to you think that's a good hearted edit to what is usually happens. And you're like, well, they're all on the bus together anyway. They're all on the sideline together anyway. So I don't know how we're going to get out of this before a vaccine. I'm hopeful, obviously, that we can. I hope that there's more tests available, and then ideally we can all just get tested, and then whoever tests negative can go free to work and positive can stay at home. I have no idea, man. I really wish I had an idea, but I don't.
Well, how about this? Because I remember reading, I think it was by ESPN guy about the different proposals the MLB had in terms of rules they would implement. I mean, they're talking about universal DH. They're talking about restricting the amount of mound. You can't have mound visits. You've got to, players might be able to have microphones. Is there a unique baseball proposal, especially within baseball, in terms of a rule change that you've seen that you think, well, maybe that might be interesting? They're cutting down the number of games, not doing extra innings. That's another thing I've seen, or not doing extra innings, but starting with the 10th inning, they would have a runner at second base. Is there anything that you see there that you think, okay, that's interesting? If they do come back, I would definitely like to see that.
I don't really mind the whole universal DH. I know that, I mean, I'm around some really big baseball old heads. I mean, I know one in Erie, the beat writer for the Erie Seawolves. Tom Reisenweber is a huge hater of the DH in the American League anyway. But I don't really mind that. I mean, we're trying to make the game they're trying to make the game better for just the normal viewer. The baseball old heads, unfortunately, I mean, it's their game. They don't want anything to change it. I can see why, but if they just want to make the game better, I will say, I mean, I don't know if I have an answer with the whole change thing, but I will say the idea of having the runner at second base to start out the 10th inning, that was a thing when I was in minor league baseball. I guess it still is now. I wasn't in 2019, but in 2018, that was the first year that happened. And the Erie Seawolves led Double-A for a time in extra inning games.
Wow.
It changes the game a lot for just how you approach it, because obviously you got a runner at second, you're just going to bunt him over and then you could just slap him in. So if you're a regular, if you're a professional baseball player and can execute that pretty easily, the game's going to end up being the same length anyway, because then that run's going to come in and then the next people can do that anyway. So nobody has a surefire answer as to how to make the games just shorter in the aspect of the innings. But I will say the mound visits thing, that is kind of something I wouldn't mind, because you call these college baseball games, and man, as much as I love my job, if you're calling a 4.5-hour baseball game, it's just like nobody seems to be getting better from a game that's 30 to 15. So I don't really mind the mound visits thing at all. If that answers your question, that's the one thing I'd be like, that's fine for me.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we shall see. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen. We hope sports will return sooner rather than later. Of course, safety being the first priority, but we will see. It's really a day-to-day thing dealing with this pandemic. But Bailey, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad we got to discuss so many different things, not even just your sports career, but even kind of going outside of that, talking about baseball rules and favorite play-by-play guys and 30 for 30. So really appreciate your sports insight. You're definitely one of the more very insightful sports fans that I know. So I know your takes are very reasoned. I know people like me, they're very hot, but you come in with some very reasoned takes. So greatly appreciate your time.
Appreciate the kind words, Billy, and thanks for thinking of me. And I had fun doing this. So hope you stay safe, and maybe I'll see you soon.
For sure. Once again, that is Bailey Engel, voice of the Bluefield College Rams. This is the Pulse with BP, episode 4. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time, folks.